philosophy translates to love of wisdom in ancient Greek. The word comes from philo, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. But philosophy is not just about being smart or knowing a lot of facts. Philosophy is the practice of asking deep questions about life, truth, right and wrong, knowledge, and reality. Philosophy asks questions like, what is the meaning of life? Meaning of life. What makes an action right or wrong? And how do we know what is true? So we can write that. How do we know what is true? What is the world made out of? And what is justice? And what is a good life? Now, these questions are not always easy to answer. In fact, many of them have been debated for thousands of years. But philosophy matters because it teaches people how to think critically. Philosophy is also different from simply having an opinion. Now, everyone has opinions, but philosophy asks us to support these opinions with reasons. For example, someone might say, if justice means treating everyone equally, a philosopher would then ask, what does equality mean? Should everyone always be treated equally or the same? Or should people be treated differently based on who they are and what they need? And what happens when equality and fairness conflict? Now, philosophy takes ordinary ideas and examines them more deeply. Philosophy differs from religion because it mainly uses reason, questions, and arguments. Religion often depends on faith, sacred stories, worship, tradition, and belief in the divine. Religions usually answer life's biggest questions through teachings about gods, spirits, creation, morality, and the afterlife. Philosophy, on the other hand, tries to answer questions by using rational inquiry. It asks people to explain their ideas, defend them, and consider objections. But this does not mean philosophy and religion are enemies. The two can overlap. Many famous philosophers were religious, and many religions include deep philosophical ideas. For example, religious thinkers often ask very philosophical questions about the soul, morality, free will, suffering, and the nature of God. Philosophy can be used to examine religion, and religion can inspire philosophical reflection. The main difference is method. Religion often begins with faith or revelation, while philosophy begins with questioning and reasoning. Western philosophy is usually said to begin in ancient Greece. This does not mean that Greece was the first place where people thought deeply. Human beings everywhere have wondered about life, death, nature, morality, and the universe. But ancient Greece produced a particular tradition of reasoning, debate, and questioning that became the foundation of Western philosophy. One of the most important changes in early Greek thought was the movement from mythos to logos. Now, mythos means explaining the world through myths, stories, and divine actions, including the gods. Now, In mythological thinking, natural events were often explained through the actions of gods. A storm might be connected to the anger of one god, and the seasons might be explained through a sacred story. Myths were powerful because they gave meaning to the world and connected human life to the divine. Logos, however, means reason, argument, explanation, or rational account. When Greek thinkers began moving toward logos, they started asking whether the world could be explained through natural causes and logical principles. Instead of only asking which god caused this, they asked, what is the underlying cause? Or is there a pattern in nature that humans can understand? This change did not happen all at once. Greek culture still had religion, myths, and gods. Philosophers did not simply erase mythology, but they began developing a new way of thinking alongside it. They tried to explain nature through observation, argument, and general principles. One early Greek philosopher was Thales of Miletus. Thales. Now, Thales is often considered one of the first Western philosophers because he tried to explain the world in terms of a basic natural substance. He believed that water was the fundamental principle behind everything. So he thought that the world was made of water. Now, today, we obviously don't believe this. We don't believe this Thales guy, but the importance of Thales is not that he got the answer right. The important thing is the kind of question he asked. He was trying to find a natural explanation for reality. Other early philosophers gave different answers. Anaximander thought the origin of things was something indefinite or boundless. Anaximenes believed air was the first substance. Heraclitus believed that change was central to reality and is famous for the idea that you cannot step into the same river twice. Parmenides, on the other hand, argued that change is an illusion and that true reality must be unchanging. These thinkers disagreed with each other, but that disagreement was important. Philosophy grew through argument. This is one reason Greece became so important in the history of Western philosophy. Greek thinkers did not simply repeat one official answer. They questioned each other. They challenged older views. They gave arguments and invited criticism, and over time, this really created a tradition of debate. Later, Socrates shifted philosophy toward questions about human life and morality. Instead of mainly asking what the world is made out of, Socrates asked how people should live. He questioned people in public and asked them to define ideas like justice, courage, wisdom, and virtue. Socrates believed that many people thought they understood these ideas, but when questioned, they could not really explain them clearly. And Socrates is famous for saying that the unexamined life is not worth living. By saying this, what he really meant was that human beings should not simply accept beliefs without thinking about them. We should examine our values, our choices, and our understanding of the world. Socrates did not leave behind writings of his own, but his student Plato wrote dialogues that present Socrates as a model of philosophical questioning. Plato expanded philosophy into a broader system. He asked questions about truth, justice, the soul, knowledge, education, and politics. In his book, The Republic, Plato asked what justice is and what an ideal society might look like. He also argued that the world we see with our senses is not the deepest reality. For Plato, true knowledge involved understanding eternal ideas or forms such as justice, beauty, and goodness. Aristotle, Plato's student, took philosophy in another direction. Aristotle studied logic, biology, ethics, politics, poetry, metaphysics, and many other subjects. He believed that knowledge should be organized carefully and that we should study the world around us. Aristotle helped shape the way later Western thinkers understood reasoning, science, ethics, and politics. His work not only influenced Greek and Roman thought, but also Christian, Jewish, and Islamic philosophy. The answers these philosophers gave helped create a future of reason and logic. But maybe important than their answers was the habit they created, questioning old answers. Philosophy became a conversation across generations. One thinker proposed an idea, another challenged it, and later thinkers refined it. This pattern became central to Western intellectual life. So why did this tradition develop so strongly in Greece? One reason was the structure of Greek city-states. Greece was not one large unified empire for most of its early history. It was made up of separate city-states such as Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Miletus. These city-states had different laws, customs, and forms of government. In some places, especially Athens, public debate became important. Citizens argued in assemblies, courts, and public spaces. This encouraged the skills of speaking, reasoning, persuasion, and questioning. Another reason was trade and cultural contact. Greek cities were connected to the wider Mediterranean world. Greeks interacted with Egyptians, Phoenicians, Persians, Babylonians, and others. Through trade, travel, and colonization, Greek thinkers encountered different beliefs, customs, and knowledge systems. When people are exposed to different ways of thinking, they begin to ask which view is correct and are our traditions only possible ones, and can reason help us decide? So, one reason was trade, another was seafaring, and debate. To basically sum up that section, these three reasons are main reasons why Greece had such a strong philosophical foundation. Now, writing also mattered. You see, the Greek alphabet made writing even more accessible than some earlier writing systems. Written text allowed ideas to be recorded, shared, studied, and criticized over time. Philosophy depends on conversation, but writing helps that conversation continue across generations. Another factor was that Greece did not have one single centralized priestly authority controlling all explanations of the world. Greek religion was important, but it was not organized in exactly the same way as some ancient religious systems. This gave some thinkers more room to speculate, question, and offer natural explanations. However, it is very important to say that Greece was not the only place with wisdom. Saying that Western philosophy began in Greece does not mean wisdom itself began in Greece. That would be wrong. Many ancient civilizations developed deep ideas about life, morality, reality, and the universe. Egypt had ancient traditions about truth, balance, justice, and cosmic order. One important Egyptian idea was Ma'at, which referred to the truth, harmony, order, and justice. Egyptian society connected morality with the order of the universe. Their religious and ethical ideas shaped how they understood kinship, law, death, and the afterlife. Egypt also had advanced knowledge in mathematics, medicine, architecture, and astronomy. Greek thinkers themselves often admired Egypt's antiquity and learning. India also had major philosophical traditions. In the Upanishads, thinkers asked questions about the self, ultimate reality, and liberation. They explored ideas such as Atman, the self or the soul, and Brahman, ultimate reality. Later, Buddhism asked deep questions about suffering, desire, impermanence, and the path to liberation. Jainism developed ideas about nonviolence, the soul, and ethical discipline. These traditions were deeply philosophical because they asked about reality, knowledge, ethics, and human freedom. China also had rich philosophical traditions. Confucianism focused on ethics, family education, virtue, and good government. Confucius asked how people should live and how society could become more humane and orderly. Taoism, associated with Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, asked how humans could live in harmony with the Tao or the Way. Taoist thought often emphasized simplicity, balance, nature, and non-forcing. Mohism, another Chinese school, argued for ideas about impartial care, practical benefit, and social order. These traditions show that deep thought existed across the ancient world. Egypt, India, China, Mesopotamia, and all other civilizations, they all contributed to humanity's search for wisdom. Greece was not special because it had wisdom and others did not. Greece was important because it developed one particular style of inquiry that later became central to Western tradition: public argument, rational debate, and systematic questioning. This is why the phrase Western philosophy began in Greece needs to be understood carefully. It does not mean that Greek thought was better than all other thought. It means that the tradition later called Western philosophy traces many of its earliest major methods, texts, and questions back to ancient Greece. Philosophy, then, is the love of wisdom pursued through questioning. It is different from religion mainly in its method because philosophy relies on reasoned arguments, while religion often relies on faith, sacred tradition, and worship. But both can deal with the same big questions. Western philosophy began in Greece because Greek thinkers gradually moved from mythological explanation toward rational explanation. They asked what the world is made out of, what truth is, what justice means, and how humans should live. They built a culture of debate where ideas could be challenged and improved. At the same time, we should remember that Greece was part of a much larger ancient world. Egypt, India, China, and many other cultures had wisdom, learning, and deep reflection. The beginning of Western philosophy in Greece was not the beginning of human wisdom. It was the beginning of one powerful tradition of asking questions through reason, dialogue, and argument. And that tradition still matters today. Every time we ask something is true, whether something is fair, how we should live, or what we can really know, we are doing philosophy. Philosophy begins when we stop simply accepting answers and start asking for reasons.